Just before we get started, some of you might know that I have another channel called Mega Projects, which is all about mega projects. If you didn't know that, please do go over and subscribe to it. Well, by popular demand, I wanted to cover some things that weren't quite mega enough for that channel, so I present to you a brand new channel called Side Projects. It covers secret Soviet space weapons, World War II's greatest airplanes, history's lost treasures, and things like that. New videos 3 times a week over on that channel, so if you were thinking, boy, I don't get enough videos from Simon, well, good news for you. There is a link below and let's get into it. Archaeology represents a constant search for answers. The information we uncover about our ancestors is generally provided piecemeal, which means that we rarely have the full picture about a particular person or civilization or event. New artifacts are being unearthed every day, but that does not mean that the collective knowledge of our past is steadily increasing. Some discoveries are so bizarre, mysterious, and unique that they serve only to raise more questions instead of providing answers. Number 10. The face carvings of Lepenski Vir. We start off with probably the oldest entry on our list, which was found in Serbia at a Mesolithic site called Lepenski Vir. This represents a vital location for European archaeology, as Lepenski Vir is one of the earliest permanent settlements on the continent, providing us with valuable information regarding one of the oldest peoples in Europe, the Iron Gates culture. That being said, there are still plenty of gaps in our knowledge of this ancient civilization that once occupied the region surrounding the Iron Gates of the Danube River. Perhaps the most pertinent example is the eerie sculptures that have been unearthed at Lepenski Vir, whose purpose and appearance still perplex scholars. The sculptures are estimated to be around 8,000 years old. Some of them depict simple geometric patterns, but many others have human-like faces, which can appear to look quite sinister through modern eyes. They usually have wide, bulbous eyes and an open, downturned mouth that to us would suggest fear or sadness. They have been carved out of quartz sandstone, and around 100 of them have been discovered since excavations at Lepenski Vir started in the 1960s. Some of the face carvings appear so otherworldly that archaeologists don't even think that they are meant to depict humans, but rather fish. So far, the sculptures remain a unique discovery in the region and an archaeological mystery that still stumps scholars as to their true purpose. Number 9. Rujum el-Hiri. Known by several names, Rujum el-Hiri in Arabic, Gilgal-Raphaim in Hebrew, it is sometimes referred to as the Garland Stonehenge. Regardless of its name, there is one thing which is certain. This is one of the most mysterious ancient structures found in the Middle East. Rujum el-Hiri is a giant megalith approximately 5,000 years old, located at Golan Heights in Levant. It's pretty obvious to see why it has earned comparisons to Stonehenge, but unlike its English counterpart, Rujum el-Hiri is not made of giant stone slabs, but rather small pieces of basalt rocks, which together weigh over 40,000 tons. These have been arranged into 5 concentric circles, with the largest one measuring over 500 feet in diameter. In the center, there is a 15-foot high cairn, which was once a tomb before being looted by grave robbers. The site was first surveyed and catalogued during the late 1960s. Since then, archaeologists have studied it extensively, but answers have been few and far between. We don't know who built it or for what purpose. Was it the site of religious ceremonies, or was it used for ancient astronomical observations? Who could have been buried at the center of such a structure? Unfortunately, it's unlikely that we'll find out anytime soon. Number 8. The Porpoise Grave. Back in 2017, archaeologists began excavating the tiny island of Chapelle Dom Hugh off the coast of Guernsey. Their original intention was to try and unearth a medieval church, but that soon went to the wayside when they uncovered something far more bizarre: the body of a porpoise buried in its own grave. The sea animal had been placed there almost 600 years ago, but the big question was why. Back then, the island was only inhabited by monks, so obviously some kind of religious rite was initially suspected, but if that was the case, it would have been something unique in Christianity. The monks also used to eat porpoises, so it could simply have been a discarded lunch, but that still presents the question of why they would have bothered to dig a hole when they could have just thrown the remains into the sea, which was only a few feet away. After all, if this was what they did with the remains, then archaeologists should have probably found a lot more graves. Ultimately, scholars believe the motive behind this strange burial was a simple and practical one: food storage. They think the monks butchered the porpoise, placed it underground, perhaps even in brine, in order to preserve it and eat it later. Then, for whatever reason, they forgot about it, leaving it to make 21st century archaeologists scratch their head. It is a solid idea, but even the scientist who put it forward admits that it would probably never be definitively proven true or false, given that so little remains of Chapelle Dom Hugh. Number 7. The Singapore Singapore Stone. The modern history of Singapore began in 1819 when it was established as a trading post by Sir Stamford Raffles and then turned into a British colony a few years later. However, there are stories, texts, maps, and legends that suggest that previous settlements have thrived in the area for centuries before Western colonization. However, historical records of their existence are hard to come by, so an accurate account of the history of pre-colonial Singapore remains highly elusive. There is one tantalizing artifact in this regard, and it is called the Singapore Stone. Today on display at the National Museum of Singapore, this sandstone fragment was once part of a giant monolith that was 3 meters high and 3 meters wide. It is dated to anywhere between the 10th and 14th centuries and sat for hundreds of years at the mouth of the Singapore River. According to the story behind it, it had been thrown there by a legendary strongman named Badang. Most importantly, though, the face of the slab was covered in 50 lines of inscriptions that allegedly contained the history of Singapore. Unfortunately, we'll probably never know what they said. The monolith was destroyed in 1843 when the British blew it up to widen the mouth of the river and make room for a fort. What happened to the rest of it is unknown, but the only fragment thought to survive is the Singapore Stone that today sits in a museum, and it does not intend to give up its secrets too easily. Despite several claims to the contrary, it has yet to be deciphered. Number 6. The Salango skull helmets. Without a doubt, the most disturbing entry on this list was discovered just last year at Salango, a site on the central coast of Ecuador. While excavating for remnants of the ancient Guangala culture, archaeologists found 11 burials dated to approximately 100 BC. Of the 11, 2 were infants, one around a year and a half, and the other between 6 to 9 months old. Although sad, what really made them stand out was the grim and unusual headgear they were wearing. Both of their skulls had been placed inside 2 larger skulls belonging to older children. Even though burial practices can differ widely between cultures, even more so thousands of years ago, researchers still proclaimed this to be the first known instance of using children's skulls as mortuary headgear. And if you want an even gorier detail, the same researchers believe that the helmets, if we could call them that, would have been covered in skin and tissue when they were fitted, otherwise they would have broken apart. Once scholars understood exactly what they had found, the one big question that remained was why. And to be perfectly honest, we still don't have any idea. Curiously, the remains of infants were found in some of the other graves, but none of them had the same accessories, having been buried in a more conventional way. Number 5. The Maine Penny. There is a little confusion regarding the origins of the Maine Penny, also called the Goddard coin. Everyone knows what it is and when and where it was found. The big mystery that has caused a lot of controversy is how exactly it got there in the first place. The Maine Penny is a Viking coin dated to the 11th century to the reign of Olaf Kar, King of Norway. It was found in 1956 by 2 amateur archaeologists who were exploring a shell midden on the shoreline property of a man named Goddard near the site of an old Native American settlement called Naskeg Point. The question is, or what was it doing there? The presence of a Viking coin at a Native American site in Maine would suggest that the two cultures crossed paths at one point, but so far, the only confirmed North American Viking site is at the tip of Newfoundland in Canada, so any new additions would have a great impact on the history of both Europe and America. Unsurprisingly, scholars are reluctant to accept this idea based on a single coin, but they are also struggling to explain how it got there. Unless it was a hoax, of course. By this point, it is almost certain that the coin is indeed genuine, but it could have been planted there by Goddard or one of the archaeologists. This is the conundrum that has vexed researchers for decades, and it's unlikely it'll be resolved anytime soon. Number 4. The Cursed Amethyst. Now let's move on to cursed artifacts. Certainly, there are numerous objects and sites in the world that are purported to have curses. Most famous of all are the tombs of the pharaohs. However, we will be focusing on a mysterious gemstone instead. It is known as the Delhi Purple Sapphire, although strictly speaking it is actually an amethyst. Its exact origins are uncertain, but during the mid-19th century, it could be found in India in a temple dedicated to the Hindu god Indra. Then, the Indian Rebellion of 1857 occurred, which not only caused a lot of bloodshed, but also widespread looting. A Colonel Ferris with the Bengal cavalry obtained the gemstone and brought it back to England with him. In the years that followed, Ferris lost his good health and his fortune, and so did his son, who inherited the amethyst. In 1890, a writer and fellow of the Royal Society named Edward Heron Allen came to possess the stone. Misfortune started following him, as well as other people, to whom Aaron Allen either loaned or gave the amethyst. At one point, the writer allegedly threw the stone into Regent's Canal, only to have it returned to him a few months later after being recovered from a dredger. After that, Aaron Allen became convinced that the gemstone was cursed and stained with blood, so he placed it inside 7 lockboxes and buried it deep in a bank vault alongside a letter explaining the story behind the amethyst. It was recovered years after his death by his daughter and donated to London's Natural History Museum. Nobody else has owned it since. Number 3. The Diquis Spheres. For 800 years, Costa Rica was home to the pre-Columbian Diquis culture between the 8th and 16th centuries. The civilization is now extinct, but it left behind a strange and puzzling legacy which has gone on to become a national symbol of Costa Rica. We are, of course, talking about big balls, stone balls, called petrospheres, to be specific, over 300 of them made out of a type of coarse igneous rock called gabbro. They vary wildly in size. Some of them can be held in the hand, while the largest of them measures over 2.5 meters in diameter and weighs over 15 tons. The Diquis Spheres, as they are usually known, can still be seen today in different parts of Costa Rica, as well as museums around the world. They were buried for centuries under thick layers of sediment, which saved them from looters, and were discovered during the 1930s when corporations started clearing the land to make room for banana plantations. Since then, the Diquis Spheres have been studied extensively, but researchers have not been able to come up with much. The meaning behind them, how they were used, and even how they are made are still mysteries left behind by an almost forgotten culture. Number 2. The Codex Gigas. The Codex Gigas is one of the largest surviving illustrated manuscripts in the world. Its name literally means giant book, and it certainly lives up to it. The tome has 620 pages that are 3 feet high, and the whole book weighs 165 pounds. To make it even more impressive, all signs point to the manuscript being written by a single person, one truly dedicated monk living in 13th century Bohemia, today part of the Czech Republic. And yet this is not what makes the Codex Gigas stand out and gives it its dark reputation. No, that would be page 290, where its creator decided to draw a giant picture of Satan, thus earning the Codex Gigas the nickname of the Devil's Bible. We don't know why he did this. It certainly was not standard practice back then, but it did give rise to a legend that suggests that the Codex Gigas was created by the devil himself. According to the story, a monk was punished by being walled inside his room to starve to death. He made a deal where his life would be spared if he could create a book that contained all of humanity's knowledge in a single night. He got to work, but soon realized that his task was impossible, so he made another deal with Satan, selling his soul in exchange for the finished book. The devil then held up his end of the bargain, but included a drawing of himself to remind everyone of the manuscript's true author. Number 1. The Starving of Saqqara. Egypt represents one of the most well-known civilizations of ancient times, one that has been studied extensively for centuries, and yet there are so many elements from that time period that we still don't understand. As a key example, let's take the Starving of Saqqara, a sculpture supposedly from the pre-dynastic era of Egypt that is unlike any other Egyptian statue we've ever seen. It features 2 figures, possibly a male and female, seated opposite each other. They are nude and have large oblong heads. The sculpture is made out of limestone and also has inscriptions on it, although the language has never been identified. It is called the Starving of Saqqara, named after an ancient burial ground in Memphis, Egypt, but there is nothing certain to indicate that it was actually discovered there. That's about all we can say about it. In the 1950s, it ended up in the hands of Vincent Dini Akapoulos, an antiques collector who exhibited it in his private gallery. Later in 1999, his wife Olga donated their entire collection to the Concordia University in Montreal, Canada. There, it's been sitting for 20 years. Experts from all over the world have been consulted, and they usually come to the same conclusions. They've never seen anything like it, they don't know what the inscriptions say, and it is most likely either a unique example of ancient art or a complete fake. Only time will tell if we'll find out the truth. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below. Don't forget to subscribe, and thank you for watching.